Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I am your host, Corey Barrier, and I am here with Dr. Erin. So today we're going to just kind of talk about her story and a little bit of my story, and we're just going to kind of see where this goes. So here you go, Dr. Erin.
So excited to be here. And I think, we were talking before the podcast, and I really think that, the audience comes to certain podcasts because they love that host. And the greatest podcast I've ever been on is where it's this beautiful, conscious tennis match going back and forth. And I think it's great because I've interviewed over 3,500 people on Good Morning La La Land. And, being the founder of SOULCIETE as well, like I'm around a lot of people, but I think that the best interviews, the best talks are interactive. And that's where I think people want to go. So I'm excited to hear about your story as well and dive deep into consciousness overall.
Absolutely. So it's interesting that you bring that up. And I'll say the reason I say that is, I interviewed, I'm going to butcher his name. But in fact, he said, I think two people in his life have got his last name right. But I'll refer to him as Tyler. He was the communications director for Andy Frisella at First Forum, MFCEO.
Cool.
Project podcast. Anyway, so I was talking to him last night, and when he got on, he said, Corey, he was like, I don't really have a story. He was like, I don't have I didn't do a whole lot, and I haven't really done a lot in business, and I haven't made $1 billion. And I'm like, Tyler, like you're around Andy Frisella, like 98% of the time, because he films all of his shit. And not to mention, like, he gets to meet, like we discussed Joe Dispenza, which seems to come up every single conversation that we have, or that I have with whoever I'm talking with, because I think he's amazing, which is how, he's not how we connected, but same kind of idea. Mm-hmm. But the point of me telling you the story about Tyler is, he said, I really don't think I have much of a story. And I said, well, let's just roll with it. And so as we were talking, he uncovered a story about his baseball. He was really good in baseball, and he tore his rotator cuff, and he had to make a decision whether he was going to put his parents in a financial bind and go to private school or go and play for a public school. And so at the end of the podcast, I said, well, because things kind of fell off for him. I actually told that a little bit out of sequence. Forget about the rotator cuff part. He had to make that decision before the rotator cuff. And so he chose to save his parents the money, which was, a good kid. It was a nice thing to do. However, he gave up an opportunity to work with two major league coaches. And so what I took from that was, you are the person, you're like the people that you surround yourself with, right? So if you surround yourself with winners, then you inevitably will become a winner, right? And if you surround yourself with people who are, shitty people, then you're probably going to become a shitty person. And so as soon as he left that super winning circle and chose to go to that public school, he pretty much hated baseball.
Wow. Interesting, huh?
Right.
Awesome. In fact, it's interesting because I'm just, I'm giving a presentation on, the title is Don't Be a Broke Spiritual Leader. And then it's about basically transforming sales, and basically all the mindset that it takes to change and switch from looking at sales as if you're trying to get something, instead shifting it to really serving and having somebody commit to their dreams. And in the presentation, I was thinking about, what does it mean to have a coach? Imagine it took me 22 years to formulate the framework I have for SOULCIETE, which is a platform that develops spiritual leaders in their awakening and their mindset and all their inner work, along with developing their skill set and entrepreneurial skill set and being able to monetize to a 6-7 figure, whatever they want. And I was thinking, how much time would I have gained if I'd had a mentor. I mean, I can't even, it's definitely more than 10 times, no question about it. And I think that we have to weigh out the return, right? I mean, we think about ROI on investments and either assets or liabilities in life. Are people bringing you down? Are they bringing you up? Are you spending your money on things that are just going to be useless, a year from now, or are they going to rise as assets? And I think that we really need to get smarter as human beings to look at the bigger picture instead of just what's in front of us, that, shiny little object right in front of us. And I agree. I mean, it's a fact, scientifically, we become the effect of what's going on in our environment. And obviously from a spiritual perspective, it's imperative that we put ourselves in an environment that is in alignment.
I totally agree. It's Tony Robbins talks about this, and he says, if you can go and buy a book, we'll take Warren Buffett just for example. And Warren Buffett has written a biography about his whole entire life that took him, I don't know, he's old as shit. So 70?
Right.
You can go and read about all the stuff that he's done, all the businesses that he's built in a book. So you've condensed, back to your point about the coach, you've condensed all that time that it took him to live that and write about it. You can read it in 2 days. I don't know how to book.
It's so true. I'm writing my second book right now. I'm co-authoring with the New York Times bestseller. She's written 32 books, and I'm writing this book, and I'm like, if I had this book, you know what I mean? Like, this took me, it took me 22 years to formulate what's in there. It's taken me even more years to write the book and do all this stuff. But I think, and the book was based off of, all kinds of lineage of new thought and metaphysics and universal law and oracle processes and subconscious processes into a formula that births someone's truth. It literally births their divine power, the true identity that they are. It births their core values and getting clear and being able to put boundaries and understand how to live in alignment so you don't get upset and get confused and all that stuff. It births your purpose. Like, where was that book? But that's the point, right? I believe anything that we learn, we don't get to keep it unless we give it away. And if there's a problem that really bothers us in this world, then that's our calling to bring that and birth that to this life. So that's the beautiful thing. I totally agree. Books are been one of the most influential things in my life, for sure.
Yes, I totally agree that with everything that you said. And what's interesting about the book, so I'm an audiobook person. Like, I listen to audiobooks. However, I did 75 Hard, which is something through Andy. And so part of that challenge, so to speak, is that one of the parts is that you read 10 pages of a personal development book every day. Well, I hated reading. And I'll tell you why, because the story was that I'm ADD. Mm-hmm. And the story is that it takes me too long to read. And that's why I didn't read. Well, I told myself that story for 40 years.
Right.
So I didn't read. So when I started reading through this challenge, I thought this is going to be, because the other 4 things were like drink a gallon of water. Well, I do that. I eat right. I do that. I work out twice a day. I don't always do that, but that wasn't an issue because I've been in health and fitness forever. So, but the reading, and now it's one of the things that has stuck with me, and I actually look forward to it, which is just mind-blowing to even think about, because I resisted it for so long. And I truly believe it was because I convinced myself, or I told myself that story, that I was a slow reader.
Right. It's generally so. One of the things I remember being on the path, and I was the same, when I was in elementary school, I just didn't learn that way. And my mom went to one of the parent teachers conferences, and I said, Erin's really smart. She just doesn't apply herself. When we want to do science, she wants to do English. When we're doing English, she wants to do geography or whatever it is. Right. And I totally I was labeled, and I labeled myself dyslexic, stupid, all those things. But it's funny because when I, work with celebrities, CEOs, single moms, whatever, and it's really fascinating how the psyche works, because what happens is we make a decision. It's a decision in mind, and you could call it trauma. Trauma is relative. It's it's emotional trauma. So it can be the littlest thing. Someone can look at you and it could be trauma, right? So the point of trauma is it's a state where you have a high emotion backed by a decision, which is basically an engram. They're actually able to measure it in neurons, right? There's an actual glitch, if you will. And so I remember as a little girl, getting really upset and feeling really stupid in school one day and just deciding like, I can't do this. And it was like a command that ran my life around education. And then you grow up and you do your inner work and you realize like, oh, that's something that I just decided. And if I decided that, I can decide something different. So yeah, I get it. We all got labeled, the ones that weren't, not everybody learns the same way. We learn differently.
It's absolutely true. So are you kinesthetic? Are you auditory, visual, or all three?
That's a good question, actually. I'm a visionary. So I guess I learn by I research a lot. Like I have to like go out and look at things and observe things and feel things intuitively,
Okay.
and then allow it to like trickle into my soul, and then it comes out like it would. And if someone tells me to do something a particular way, then it's never going to happen because I'm a total control freak and totally want to do it my way. And so, yeah, it's just never going to happen. That's just never going to happen. I could never be an employee. I could never be, it just wouldn't work.
I think, it's funny you say that because I very similarly always been the same. As a kid, I always got in trouble. And I'm not really sure why. I guess just to be an asshole, maybe. I'm not sure. But, if you tell me.
Wait. Let's just go there for a minute.
All right, let's do it.
Because we met on social media. We met through 365 Driven, a podcast. And so I've never met you in real life, or I've never even had even this kind of a conversation, right? And so I was looking at your stories and stuff, and I'm like, oh, if you're open for coaching, you have, and all the work that I do is I basically help people shift their identity back to their true identity. Okay. That doesn't mean that the identity that people have is bad or wrong or anything else. In fact, once we get to the true identity, oftentimes we get to be the same identity. We just are freed up from any kind of feeling of guilt or feeling not unconditional love towards it or whatever else. But the first thing I thought when I looked at your, stories or saw you online and we were beginning to communicate about this, I was like, oh, he's got like this identity of being the bad, not the bad boy in like, bad boy player, but like the bad boy, and it's like an identity that you're running around with. And it doesn't mean it's good or bad, but it's so fascinating, right? Like, where do we get that identity? Where do we take on that, alias? Where do we do that? And I'm so fascinated by consciousness. I never get bored with it ever.
It's interesting that you say that because for a long time on social, first of all, I was terrified of getting on video. I don't know why. Because it's really silly when I'm worried about who on social media is going to judge me. I don't even fucking know these people. And so to your point, I've attracted women who like the bad boy image for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I have tattoos. I don't know what it is exactly, but and look, I have done my fair share of things that would certainly label me as that. But at the same time, dude, I can put a suit on in a heartbeat and you would never know that I had ever been in trouble. I got caught with cocaine in 2005 and needless to say, go ahead.
But I think the point is that I think that we all have these identities that we take on, whether it be in this lifetime in childhood, or it's coming down through our DNA and we kind of take on that persona. But I think the point is that it's fascinating to me that when you start doing this work, I'm trained in doing subconscious or Greek oracle processes. And it all is about identity. That's really all it is. Limiting beliefs are really a consideration of who you are, which is an identity. I'm somebody who is, it's always hard. I'm somebody who, gets things easy. I'm somebody who struggles and is always feeling sick. I'm somebody who, it's all these identities. And when you start, diving into thousands of people's consciousness, I just now look at people and I can almost hear and feel and smell their identity. You know what I mean? Sure. And it doesn't mean it's good or bad or anything. It's just, I still have identity, but it's like, we're all just walking around in like these clothing, these suits that we have of this identity. And we actually think that's who we are. And, I just think it's so fascinating.
It is. I was telling a story to someone just over maybe it was earlier yesterday. I was interviewing with the guy, and a friend of mine, Chris Saunders, who's in the Arte Syndicate, and he had asked me to go to St. Louis. Or actually, what had happened is I told my wife, "Do you know what the Arte Syndicate is?" Mm-mm. All right. I'm surprised Tony didn't mention it. But anyway, so it's a group that is of highly successful people. Mm-hmm. You pay a chunk of money to be in. It's like a real super expensive club for kind of a fraternity, like whatever. But it's all people that are growth mindset and are willing to help other people, so on and so forth. The point is that the tickets went on sale. So I told my wife, I said, "Hey, the tickets went on sale. I think I want to go. Or I think I want to go." I had already written down in my journal, a journal every morning, that I was going to go to this event. And most of the time I don't worry about the how. If I can consciously think, I don't worry about how I'm going to get somewhere. I just have to know I'm going to do it. Right. And so, when I told her that, she said, "Well, let's figure out, how much it's going to cost, whatever." And I was like, okay. 30 seconds later, Chris's wife FaceTime me. Well, I don't FaceTime anybody, so I didn't answer the phone. First of all, plus I didn't know the number. And so I asked her, I was telling my wife, I'm like, "Who the hell would be FaceTiming me?" And she said, "I don't know, but you might want to call them back." And what had happened is Leanne had texted my wife and said, "Hey, tell your dumbass husband to answer the phone." And I answered the FaceTime, and she was like, "Hey, I can bring a guest to the syndicate event." And it was, it was 30 seconds before, or 30 seconds after I had told that to my wife, and the flood of emotion that came over me because someone would do something so nice and so kind, because what they did for me was, it's special. It was really special. Because unless you're invited to go with one of the members, you're like in the cheap seat, so to speak. Right.
Isn't that amazing? Like, that's what I call flow. It's like, I know that I'm in flow, I'm in alignment when the phone rang today. A dear friend of mine, she said, "Hey, I'm going to a very intimate event tonight, Jay Shetty and some people, and my husband can't go. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Sure, no big deal." But that's what happens when you're in flow, and I'm not always in flow. There's times when I am trying to force things and make things happen and figure out the how, and we call that outlining. And when I'm in my highest expression and in flow, things happen like that. You just can't explain it.
It's so true. It's so true. And so, after she asked me to go, I bawled. Like, I broke down. And I broke down the phone with the guy yesterday, and it just, I can't explain the feeling that I had, because because she thought of me to go. And, lots of times, for at least in my life, I don't give myself very much credit lots of times. Like, I know I'm a good person and I know I do good things, but I would rather pay you a compliment because it makes me feel better than you pay me a compliment. That makes sense. And so the point is, because of that and me going to that event with them, it sparked something inside of me, and I met the exact right people. And I started this podcast just, less than a week ago. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I have interviewed people that get paid to go on interviews, and I can't explain it. I don't understand. I do understand it. It's the universe, because to your point, I was in alignment, and this is what I should be doing. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing feeling.
You're gifted. And I want to first to say thank you for, it's an honor. And just like you, we're in service, and, I have friends who are like, why don't you, only interview huge names and only go on huge whatever. And I'm like, that's just not how I work, because if I can affect one person, then I feel like it's really worth it. And there's a time and a place for all that, but I feel like I look at all human beings as the same. I don't look at anybody that's better or worse or whatever. And I just feel like you felt really authentic in who you are. And that's where I'm like, oh, it's in alignment or not. It's somebody authentic. It doesn't even matter what they are. But it is interesting that you said that, because the identity of the bad boy is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy of basically having people reject, and it's really a self-worth thing. And it's not just the bad boy. We all have it. All human beings, the core limiting belief is I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And I'm divided and alone. I have it. We've all had it. It's a collective thing. It's never going away, because it's a collective consciousness, and we have a relative truth. So we'll always have that divided self and the divine self. But it's really becoming aware and recognizing when we're getting into our lower self versus our higher self. So I'm sure for you, just like me or anyone, there's times that we revert more into that bad boy or that bad girl that, I have the same thing where I'll push people away, or I can get into my divine self and my higher self and get more present and not try and push it away through, whatever kind of character it takes to get there. Right.
Right. Yeah, it makes total sense. And you're right. And to recognize that we battle with that limited belief or that struggle. And I say it's a struggle. You look at it how you want, but we do all go through that, that we all have dark days, it's just not, a lot of people just don't talk about it. And especially on social media, they don't, people don't put that out there, including myself. I don't always do it. I'll be honest. When I have my shittier days, I don't know why, because I don't want to be judged, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculous. And I told my wife the other day, we had to drive Asheville, which is like 4 hours away. And she's a wedding photographer, and she had an 8-hour wedding to shoot. And then we drove back because she had something to do the next day. And I said, hey, I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do a quick Instagram story about, we're both entrepreneurs. So sometimes you have to fucking do what you have to do. And lots of times we work harder than people that have regular jobs. Yeah. And I said, I need to share about this. And she said, well, why do you have to talk about, us being entrepreneurs? I said, well, that's what we are. I mean, that's the truth. And so it was just an interesting conversation, but it's still hard to sometimes, even today, hard for me to talk about those bad days. You know?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, I think that we've fallen into the positive psychology, which is a very dangerous thing, to only, to judge certain emotions and only want to be certain emotions. Like, we don't work that way. That's not, in fact, such an interesting distinction my girlfriend and I were talking about yesterday around being confused. And it's a typical thing that lots of people go into, but it is the birthing of clarity. So anytime you're about to birth clarity, you almost have to go through confusion to birth the new clarity, right? So you're constantly leveling up in consciousness. Your mind is expanding, your growth is expanding, your purpose and calling and your legacy. But in order to get to the next quantum leap, you have to have chaos before it goes back to order. Chaos goes back to order. So it's like people get so overwhelmed and I'm confused and it's like, oh great, that means I'm about to birth something new.
So true.
And we don't understand that creative process. That is just part of you can't get happy until you know being sad. You can't have success if you don't understand failure. Like you can't have one without the other. It's the same. It's literally one coin. And if you flip it, it's the same thing. It's literally, you can't have one without the other side.
You're right. And this is what I see a lot. I see, people, whoever it may be, if I'm working with somebody, if I'm coaching them or even a friend or whatever the case may be, and there is chaos, right? There's shit in their life going on. And that's when people sometimes quit and they stop. And the problem with that is that they're 2 seconds away from that amazing moment. And I am grateful that I'm aware of that. And I have to tell myself from time to time, look, you're going through this for a much bigger reason, and I just don't think people recognize that. And I think people fall short because they size themselves up to a smaller person, a lesser version of themselves, so to speak.
Totally. I remember it very vividly. I remember, I grew up with watching Oprah at 4:00 in the afternoon and stuff like that. And I was so inspired. I had done so much inner work and got my 9 rights in shamanism and even checked out Scientology. I went everywhere. I was obsessed with, consciousness. And I finally got my spiritual practitioner's license and became a New Thought minister and became a doctor of divinity. And I had this calling that came through when I was in ministry. I'd meditate and pray every day. And I had this vision that came through of a TV show. And I was like, first of all, I'm not in the industry. Secondly, like to be an Oprah, like that's just such a huge thing. Right. But I realized that it was in thinking it had to be perfect, some big, huge production that was holding me back from just taking that first step. And I think that it's one of the saddest things to think people won't start because they think it has to be perfect or it has to be some huge thing. And it's just, if you're doing it, for me, is like, if I'm not doing it because I love it and I'm not enjoying the journey, then there's no point in getting to the destination. There's no point.
That's a really good point. To that exact point, my mic sat on my desk for 3 months. And I told myself, well, you haven't really gone through Libsyn, or you don't really know how it works. So, you'll get to it. Until, when I was at the event, I ran into a guy, he's a Navy SEAL. He'll be my the first interview podcast that I'll drop. And this dude is amazing. And I met him, actually, we were getting ready to leave the thing. I don't even know how we ran into him. And I said, hey, I actually didn't know he was a Navy SEAL. I said, why don't you be on my first podcast? Because I knew him from social. And I knew that, he was in the syndicate and he was, whatever, he had tattoos and shit. So I was like, you should be on my podcast. And he was like, hey, I don't mind doing that at all. And I said, okay, let's put it on the books. And we put it on the books for Wednesday. And at that point, I forced myself to be uncomfortable enough to dig into this and figure it out. And it really didn't take me that long to figure it out. Now, do I have it completely figured out? I wouldn't say that, but I know a hell of a lot more than most people do about it in a very short amount of time because I wanted it. I wanted to do it.
Right.
There
was this cute, I've been going on TikTok. I'm not really on there, but I've been trying to look at it and understand it because I'm like, do I want to commit to this? Do I not want to commit to this? Like, really? So I got in there. I did have like only one friend that was actually posting on TikTok and like not very many things, but there was this adorable little video of him and his son. And it was something to the effect of, they had $1 bill or something. And they said, how do you make money? He asked his little boy. And the little boy said, you look for it. And it was like so simple and so profound, because it was like, I remember when I had a stillborn son when I was 22. And I got pregnant a month to the day, a date later, with my son, who now is 24. And I remember when my son was a little baby, and I remember I was so broke. I literally was waiting tables, and I had a car that was probably worth $2,000. I would go to the thrift store for clothes. I had no money. And I remember looking at him sleeping, because it was the most gorgeous thing, as you know, like looking down at I'm assuming you have kids. When you look at your kids, whether they're sleeping or when they're waking up, it's the most magical time ever. I'm getting chills right now thinking about it. And I remember looking down at him and thinking, I want to be able to provide for him more. And I made a decision. I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire. I don't know how, but I'm going to do it. And I just remember not knowing how, but I was like, if someone else can do it, why can't I figure it out? And I just kept focusing on it, kept focusing. And I became a self-made millionaire by the time I was 30. And the point is that when you decide, you put it down like it's a, landmark in the ground, not like Landmark Forum, but like a landmark in the ground. And you decide, the universe has to conspire. It has to. It's law. It's universal law.
And you have to have, you have to have the intent, as we talked about earlier. If your intention is truly at that landmark, you will get there, because it goes back to what you said. Whatever you look for, you'll find. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. But to your TikTok point, or to your TikTok comment, the same guy was telling you that that's is really good with this podcast. He said, you need to get on TikTok. So I came home, and I knew my daughter was on it. So I was like, I need you to show me how to work this stupid thing. I personally don't understand I really don't quite grasp it. It seems really silly to me. But the point with the guy, he said, listen, there's no limitations on TikTok. He said, there's no algorithms. There's no, maybe there's algorithms, but there's no, so if you've got 100,000 people that follow you, only 30% at most are going to see your things, because they have the algorithms that prevent the rest of the 70. I don't know why that is, but they do, right? On Instagram. You're aware of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So TikTok has not evolved.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
So he organically grew like 1 million followers in no time. And
who is this person?
Zachary Babcock is his.
Okay, introduce me to Zachary.
Yeah, I will.
But this is what's fascinating about TikTok, because I've been on not very much, just a few times just to check it out. And the first time I was like, this is so stupid, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, why do people care about these silly little 15-second clips, whatever? But then I started looking at it, I was like, oh, this is pretty genius, because number one, people have no attention span. Second is that everything's video. Like, I think that the whole filtered picture of some pretty girl on Instagram is in my opinion, is really boring. I'm not interested in it. So I either want to laugh, or I want to be entertained, or have an education. So I do think it's a decent platform. I have no idea. I mean, I went on there and I found a bunch of my friends, and then I realized I went to all their accounts and nobody actually was doing anything on it. So they all went on and they got the account, and then they didn't know what to do with it. So they had like one post or no post or whatever. So I was like, okay, well, this is interesting,
Yes, absolutely. Don't quote me on the million followers, but it was a shit ton.
Yeah.
Or no, it wasn't him. I'm sorry. It was Zach Prince. So Zach is a hypnotist. So I also have my certificate in hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It was Zach. It was different Zach. Sorry. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the point is that in no time, he hit 1 million followers on fucking TikTok. Like, mm-hmm. But it's hard for me to be silly on TikTok. I don't know. I just think it's silly. But we're probably going to.
But I disagree. I don't think that you should be silly. If your mission is, clearly you have a mission here. Clearly it's about consciousness. Clearly it's about self-development. Why don't you be you on TikTok?
It's a great question.
There's 1 million people doing funny and being goofy. Why don't you actually teach what you want to teach? Because there's probably not a lot of people teaching.
I'll take that, and I'll start applying it. So, tell me some more about you and your story. Tell me something that maybe that you maybe haven't uncovered before,
that I haven't uncovered,
or maybe that you've uncovered, but it's been few and far between.
mm-hmm. You know, I think I was telling you that I'm writing a book, and you know, I tell my story a lot about having a stillborn, and I tell a little bit about my childhood, which is a really interesting story. I mean, I didn't think it was an interesting story until people started saying it was an interesting story, because I'm kind of like, why would anyone want to hear my story, right? But I did grow up in somewhat of a pseudo-hippie commune in the hills of Santa Barbara. It's really a fascinating thing. My dad kind of, you know, my parents got married really young, and my dad went off, and I grew up in kind of this hippie commune, and it was really fascinating because it was right next to Jane Fonda's ranch. So I would be in like a neighborhood that had no money, running around barefoot with like parents doing drugs, you know, and then there would be like Jane Fonda's ranch with Michael Jackson coming through it. So it was this big dichotomy and just this bizarre world that I was like plopped into with no like rules whatsoever. And I remember going to my mom as a little girl. I was very inquisitive. I came in with a lot of, you know, spiritual abilities, but I didn't know what that was. I didn't know you can see people or hear voices or, you know, be able to read people's mind. I had no idea, right? So I'd go to my mom and I'd be like, what are we doing? Like, what's this thing called life? And like, what's the point of this thing, you know? And she was like, why are you asking these things? And just go play with your, like, she's like, she was like, just rolls her eyes and be like, I don't even get where this is coming from, you know? But I think the point is that anyone who's listening or watching, I think there's just certain people that are seekers. You know, we just are kind of born that way, just like people who are really funny, or just like people who are very innovative and very, you know, vision. I think that the point is that you've got to embrace yourself. And for me, I turned off a lot of my abilities because it was almost, it wasn't acknowledged. It just wasn't, you know, and I think that if you have a calling out there, if you're listening to this, if there's something in you that knows, like, I just know I'm supposed to write a book, or I just know I'm supposed to be the leader, I just know I'm supposed to, you know, be an entrepreneur, whatever that is, listen to that knowing, listen to that calling, honor that truth for you. It's so important for you to be you and come out of the closet as that person, right? Yes. I would say coming out of the closet with whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Be you.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And it's such a challenge to do from time to time, you know, and I've gotten a lot better at it. And yeah, it's crazy because I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there is a higher purpose for me, right? So a year ago, October a year ago, I closed my hormone clinic. I had a hormone replacement clinic with, growth hormone, testosterone, HCG. We did Botox filler and, you know, all this shit, right? I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's a long story, but my partner he had a third grade education. Mm-hmm. Red flag number one. But he invested. He was my investor. So I built this thing from the ground up, and I loved it because I love cosmetic shit. I get cosmetic shit done. I get Botox. I get Juvederm. I love it. I've had surgery. I love it. You know, I'm not addicted to it. I don't mean it like that, but like, I have no reason to hide that. Right. And so I split from him, which was very challenging. It was hard for me. It was very, very hard.
Like a divorce.
And it was, and it wasn't because of him. It was because my baby was my business. I had poured my heart and soul into it, and it all revealed itself as time went on. But I went to see Tony Robbins in November around this time, actually. Mm-hmm. And after that event, I knew there was something else in that realm that I needed to be doing. I knew that I needed to be in that space somehow. And I had never had that thought, really. And so we go through what we have to go through to get to where we are. And I hope the people that are listening can embrace that and think about, well, you know, I was in a car accident 2 weeks ago, and guess what? Most likely, my guess is it saved me from being killed 15 minutes later. I don't know that, but guess what? There was a reason that damn deer ran out in front of me at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was, but there was a reason for it. And it was a better reason than if I would have kept driving. And I do believe that. I believe everything in our universe happens for a reason.
For sure. Yeah, I believe the same. I think it's interesting because this week, I'm not big into astrology. I know that we're connected with the stars, but it's just not my genre. And I was on a big podcast last night called High Vibe TV, and their big YouTube channel and a bunch of stuff. And it's all about astrology. And the big thing right now is like they're like, oh, it's just this really intense energy and it's Scorpio, whatever, and all this stuff. And everyone's talking about how it is so like gnarly and all this stuff. And quite frankly, this week, some really big transitions have happened in career-wise. And I was thinking, if I weren't awake, if I wasn't in the right mind, I could easily look at these things as if they were bad. And I don't even for a second see any of it bad. For example, Good Morning La Land, we are transitioning to another studio. And I was wanting to be a little bit slower than it went. But as far as the other studio, basically discovered that we were going to, and they basically wanted us they want to do a different show. So it was kind of like a overnight kind of thing that we went off that one studio. And my old self would have been like, oh, this is a disaster. This is terrible. This is hard. And I mean, like now I'm like, oh, this is a blessing. Like, it's like, I have all this extra time. We're going to go whenever we're going to go to this next studio. It's like perfect. And that's the difference. The difference for me is when you do your inner work and you wake up to see the universe is working for you. All of life is for your growth, for your expansion, for all that. It just doesn't change. Like I remember I lost $1 million I got a phone call that I lost $1 million last year. And I was upset for, I kid you not, 2 minutes. And I was like, great, universe. If you don't want that energy in my life, I'll make 5 million tomorrow. No problem. And it was like over. And that's the point, is that when you get in right consciousness and you understand, you're unshakable, you're untouchable, you're unstoppable. And that is where everybody deserves to be.
I absolutely agree. And, that's kind of how I feel doing this.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting because it seems like everybody that I've talked to or interviewed and had conversations with, there's something about that person that I don't know what it is about me, but I bring out something in their life that they haven't thought about or they've forgotten. Just like same example as I was saying about Tyler last night. It's like, I've never even thought about it that way. And like, he's pretty deep into, Joe Dispenza and, all the things that I would imagine that you talk about and that I agree with. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think I found a niche. I think I found my niche. So what else? Tell me something else that, that would surprise maybe some of.
I think that, so what is intuitively coming through, or what I was just listening to what's speaking through right now, and what speaks through is for people to understand trauma and understand their subconscious and what's going on. I think it's a very valuable thing for people, and changed my entire life when I started understanding it. So what I'd love to talk about for a minute is just having people understand how the subconscious mind works so that they can begin to have choice, right?
I love it.
So years ago, when I was beginning to seek and want to go from suffering and in my suffering and heal myself, I sought a lot of different modalities. I sought a lot of conferences. I'd go to great conferences and I'd be all pumped up, and then I'd come back home and then I'd be like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I keep that level of motivation or whatever it is? Or I'd start projects and then I'd stop projects, and I would be in dysfunctional relationships, and I'd go, I want to be loved and I want to not judge people, but I don't know why I can't, or whatever that is. I want to make money, but I can't quite figure it out. And so it wasn't until I started understanding the subconscious and understanding why we know what we're supposed to eat, but we don't eat it. We know what we should do in relationship, but we don't end up doing, we sabotage it at some level. So what the hell is that? So I began to dive into the subconscious, and the subconscious mind, the greatest analogy we can use of the subconscious mind is a computer. So I truly believe that we are, we're spiritual beings and we're having a human experience and we are directing energy. And right now we're directing this thing called the body. So it's like if you came down and you got in your car, you get inside your car and you're driving your car and you can get out of your car, but you're not your car. And people forget you're not this body and you're not the belief. So the greatest analogy is like a computer. So if you're listening right now on your phone or computer, you can touch your, phone or computer, right? This is considered the hardware. Our bodies, our neurons, our pathways are what is the hardware. Inside of your phone or computer is what's the software. And it can upgrade it, it can get downgraded, it can get glitches in it. We're the same way. We have programming. It's our belief systems. We're programmed through our lineage, through DNA coming down. We're programmed through the movies that we see, the cultural consciousness, whatever that is, okay? So next you have memory. There's X amount of memory in this phone. There's whatever, there's X amount of memory. And you can have, it helps with your ability to, do all kinds of things. We have memory as well. Memory comes in our epigenetics and comes down our coding. It is also stored in what we call the Akashic records from a spiritual perspective, meaning that there are mental pictures for everything that's ever happened that we can tap into because all memory is in us. It's living and breathing in every single cell, right? So the fourth part of the computer is you can have the greatest computer, you can have the greatest software, you can have the greatest memory, but it's not going to do anything without the operator. The operator is you. You are not your computer. You're not the body. You're not your belief systems. You're not your memory. You are a spiritual being directing this thing through a body, right? So what happens on a computer, and what do you get? You get glitches in your computer. The computer gets slow, gets a little spinning ball. It gets slow because there's too many, things open. There's the cache. There can be viruses. There's all kinds of things. Same things happen with us. We get confused. We get overwhelmed. We get depressed. We get, all these things. And so what do? We do the same thing as we do with the computer. Well, we've got to go in and we've got to close down all those tabs that are playing in the background, complete them, shut them down. We clear out the cache, we clear out the memory, we organize it, we do whatever we need to. We maybe need to upgrade our software, and we might need to reboot the entire thing. It's the same thing in subconscious work. So what we do is we go in and we do all those things. The first thing we do is trauma. Trauma is the thing that's holding those open tabs that are open because it's like the past thing that happened with your ex is still playing out today because we've got this trauma around it. We've got charge on that mental picture. So what we do in trauma work is we go in and we neutralize it. We complete that cycle. We look and see what commands you decided out of it. We close it down, complete it, and put it where it's supposed to be. So it's not running our life like puppet strings. Next, we basically get into getting into your true identity, shifting back to the truth of who you are, which is a clear computer that knows exactly what it's supposed to do. So we go into your core values, getting clear of what's the intention with this computer. There can be a million different people using computers, and what you do with your computer is going to be unique for you or for me or for whomever. And we bird the purpose and calling for somebody because you got to get clear of what you're going to do when you go on your computer. Are you designing something? Are you creating an email? Are you creating and what's the intention? Where is it going, right? And what's it doing? So this is the process. So I think people need to know this so that they can understand why they're getting confused. Why can't they ever get happy? What's wrong with them? And it literally, you got to clean up your computer. You got to clean up the subconscious mind because the subconscious mind is playing out about 98+% of your life, all the past things. And you've got to use the subconscious for your goodness. It does positive and negative things. It's important to use it to put automated things in you want and take out the automated things that no longer serve you. So there's my rant on subconscious work.
So that was fantastic. I love this subject. So what's super ironic about your whole analogy? So this is exactly what I went through today. I woke up and I went to my computer. And last night before I went to bed, I thought I should shut down all the shit on my computer. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm not doing it. I'm going to bed. And a stupid ass update came through last night and shut my computer down. Wow. And when I say shut it down, like I have been on the phone with Apple all day long trying to retrieve back all the crap that I had. All of my podcasts were on, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this cannot be happening. I've been staring at that fucking wheel all day long. And and to right now, it's still downloading whatever the hell I could possibly pull out of this stupid cloud. And so your analogy was exactly what I've been going through today. But to the point of our programming and our subconscious mind, it is, I think it's 128 out of millions of pictures that go through our minds a day that we actually capture. It's practically nothing. I mean, have more pictures. I mean, and that's how we see everything through picture, really.
Yeah, holographic, and we're just seeing a splice of it. It's like one time you thought love hurts, and you only see and anytime you see love, it has to also see hurt. That's like true. It can't not see the hurt.
Right. Or if you're constantly broke, it's because, well, you either spend all your money on something stupid because you have to get back to that state. It's like the thermometer in our house. If the temperature is set at 68 and the sun comes out blazing ass hot, the air conditioner comes on. It's hot for a little bit, but then the AC comes on, vice versa with the heat. And so it levels out. Well, if your temperature gauge is broke, meaning you're broke, if you're financially broke, and that's where your gauge is, no matter what happens here, no matter if you go below it or above it, somehow you're going to get back to that same temperature.
I love that.
It's so true, though. It's so true. And you have to be aware of that. And that happens with a lot of things, relationships. You know, usually we get into the same type of relationships. I always wonder, why the hell would somebody stay in a verbally or physically abusive relationship? Well, because that's the program.
It's the program. Yeah. It's so fascinating because it really is. It's such a funny, I think relationships in particular, you can see the cycle more than anything because it's always like, you know, a very typical cycle is somebody has to be, someone needs to be abandoned. And so they have to find somebody that can abandon them, right? They've got to have somebody that retreats, you know, when times get hard, and then they're trying to push and go, no, communicate more. You're wrong for not communicating. And then as soon as they, you know, start communicating, they're like, oh, I'm not that into this person anyway. You know, like it has to be this dynamic. It's a perfect vacuum for whatever's going on. And if you have the identity of I'm somebody who is not worthy of love, it doesn't mean if the most loving person comes in, you won't even be able to have it. You won't even be able to, you know, you won't be like, I'm just not into this person. Don't know why. It's because you can't even accept love.
Right. Yeah. You don't have the capability of recognizing when someone is trying to actually love you, and you typically push them away if that's what you're used to. If you're used to being with an asshole, then you're attracted to assholes because that's your fucking temperature gauge.
Or like guys will be, I have older clients and they'll be like, oh, I got these young women and all they want is, you know, they want me to pay for things. Well, what do you think happens when you objectify people and you pull up in your, you know, fancy car and flash things, you know, around? It's like, it's a transactional relationship. It's not transcending, and it is all the same. No one's better, no one's worse. Like everyone's playing their roles, and like you're just getting what you're getting. Like right. It's just recognize the game, you know? That's
totally true. And if you're that guy pulling up in whatever and you're dating younger women, well, that's what you want, or you wouldn't be doing that. You know, if you're, and look, at the end of the day, if I'm 60 years old and I'm dating a 24-year-old and she's dating me because I'm rich as shit and I'm dating her because she's gorgeous, well, guess what? Everybody wins.
Everyone wins. Yeah. And don't get us wrong. It's ages. I think that the whole paradox of age and dating, everything's really changing, and for authentic reasons. But I do think there's still, doesn't matter if it's in whatever age, non-age, color, whatever, there's transactional and there's transcending relationships. It doesn't matter. But yeah, it's all the same thing. It's all consciousness. It's all the belief, and the universe. You look through that, the filter, and I've watched it over and over again with clients, and I just think it's the most fascinating thing. And I think that people don't realize, if people understood the power that can change their mind if they actually did this work, people would be taking second mortgages on their house all day long to say this is the most important thing, because it's actually what I believe is we're actually completing our entire DNA, and it's actually healing our children and healing our lineage and healing everything and making us live in the true possibility, true free will, and being able to be expressed. And we need love, and we need connection, we need expression. And if we're running out of program, and we're running out of fear, and we're running out of our old patterns, what's the point? Who cares if you have a multi-million-dollar house, or if you have whatever? It's you're still in a jail cell because you haven't figured out how to have true freedom within your own consciousness. So I think it's the most valuable thing we have. It's created the entire universe, so it is the most valuable thing.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree. I totally agree. And it's when I hear people, because I've been sober over 10 years, and I attended 12-step program for quite some time, and I don't anymore. I'm not saying that people should or shouldn't. It had a role in my life for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started on this journey, which was last July, I started on this journey, and I started digging more into the subconscious and the things that we tell ourselves and the language of the mind. And I realized something, and I've only met, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but I've only met one or two other people that would even have a conversation with me about this. And it was that if I stand up and say, hey, I'm an alcoholic, and I do that over and over and over and over and over, well, then I'm always going to be and feel like I'm broken, and I'm going to always feel like I'm one sip away from a drink. And guess what? I'm not. I just don't fucking drink. Like,
this is a really important topic. I'd love to dive into this.
Yes, let's go.
I dealt with addiction. I was bulimic from the time I was 17 to 20, and I also dealt with codependency. And I've thought a lot about addiction. What is addiction, and how does this work from a metaphysical standpoint, from understanding energy and how we direct energy? So this is the deal, is we direct energy. And if we put something more powerful than ourselves over and over and over again, we will experience being the effect of that. We will experience that because we've created it in mind. So if we always have to have drugs and alcohol, for example, we're anytime we're trying to escape, we're going to that for our escape, for our pleasure, for our whatever, over and over again. We're handing our power over and over again. Then it's like it goes into the automated system. It's a habit. And it turns into addiction, right? So it's not so much that you are powerless. You are 1,000% powerful. You're so powerful that you can create yourself powerless because you're handed your power over and over again. And that's the distinction that I think needs to be made in AA. Obviously, AA is amazing. It helps millions and millions of lives. And there's a lot of people who have a problem with it because they don't see God outside of themselves. And damn straight, they're right. God is within, and you are so powerful that you created yourself to be disempowered. And in knowing that, we're able to have a new possibility, which is saying, I have experienced being an alcoholic, and now I choose to experience being somebody that is creating a life that is abundant, amazing, healthy, and has an extraordinary community. And I'm here to share my story around it, to be able to show people how they can go from feeling like they are in total hell to creating heaven on earth.
Absolutely. I agree. And, for a long time, I had written out this long post when the light came on, and I went, fuck, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is what I've been doing. I've been repeating this whole thing over and over. And, I won't get into the percentages of success rate, but it's not great. I want to tell you that right now. It's not great in AA. And again, I'm not bashing AA. It's had a place in my life, and it has a place in someone's life that needs it at that time. And so be it. But I don't think it's somewhere you need to live.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think that comes down to another really important distinction. If you look at the stats, and I don't know if they're accurate, so don't totally quote me on this, but when I've done the research on it, there is people have just as great odds in AA as out of AA if they decide to get sober. And so again, from a perspective of subconscious mind, what shifts someone's life is a decision, a powerful, clear commitment decision. And so it doesn't matter if you've made that decision and you've gone to AA, or you've made that decision and stopped drinking out in the world. The reality is when you make that powerful decision, that's what sticks. And that's why the percentage isn't good in or out of, because alcoholism, you've done it over and over again. It's in the programming. So it is good to have a community, whether it be in AA or not. It's always good to have a community. If you're rising in entrepreneurship, or if you're trying to overcome addiction, it's always better to have a supportive community. Doesn't matter what it is, but you've got to have a community that you believe in. And if you don't believe in whatever, you're going to do poor in that, because it's going to be another justification for you to fall off the wagon.
I totally agree with that. And I often wonder, so what I was going to say prior to that is I had ran this past one of my buddies who's 18, 19 years sober, and I've known him for most of that time. And he said, well, then, why would you jeopardize why would you put that out and then not have the option to go back? And I got to thinking about that, and I bought it. I bought into it. I didn't do the post, but the longer I thought about it, I'm like, I don't need it to go back to, and I just don't. I mean, if I felt like I needed to, then I would go back, but I just don't feel that. I don't have the desire. But the thing is this: I wish there was something outside of AA that was more like this.
Yeah, well, that's what actually spurred SOULCIETE. And that's, I think, why the universe has brought us together. Because one of the reasons why I started SOULCIETE was I would go to an AA meeting, or any of the 12-step rather. I'd be in spiritual centers, I'd be whatever. And I'm always growing and going, checking things out, seeing what's working, what's not working, And one day I went to a 12-step meeting, and I was sitting there, I was thinking, this doesn't resonate with me. But it's so beautiful to think about coming together for 1 hour where there's principles where people live, by, and people share their story, and there's support and fellowship. And I thought, this is amazing. This needs to be everywhere out in the world without it necessarily under some of the aspects of this. That's when we do have stuff around. We do a love soul session, which is for basically principles to live by, because as a spiritual practitioner that I teach how we use our mind for good, basically, right? To create what we do want instead of what we don't want. And so codependency is a great one, right? Like, if you just did the one principle of never making someone wrong, every relationship in your entire life would change. If you just did that one principle, and if you had a support group to come back together for an hour and support each other in that one principle, your entire world would transform. And so that was the entire premise of building SOULCIETE. And then in building SOULCIETE, it was natural to build spiritual leaders and certify them, because really to embody principle, it's like going to the gym to become a world, wrestler. So you got to keep going. You got to go and you got to go and you got to train. You got to figure out how the best way to lift the weights. You got to figure out all those things. And it's the same with becoming someone who is learning how to reprogram the subconscious mind, and learning how to be a spiritual coach, and learning how to align with universal law. It's no joke. You are becoming an Olympian champion in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just like a muscle. You have to work it in order to grow it. And if you don't work it, then you lose it. I mean, It is what it is, So what I'm going to invite you to do, and us to do, yes,
is to come up with the principles that you'd want to live by and what you'd want to create that is another choice for someone other than an AA. Something that is based, if you feel like these principles are good, if you align with them, which I know you do, let's come up with that 1 hour. Let's come up with that. For the people that don't believe God is a man in the sky, because that's what the verbiage sounds like,
Right.
Like, that doesn't work for me.
Sure. No, I accept it. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
There's clearly a reason that we had this conversation, because I certainly didn't necessarily intend on delving into that. But honestly, I don't know that I've met another person. Well, I haven't met another person that said that to me. Hey, well, would it make sense? Like, since you've got this idea to come, you have the idea, make it happen.
Yeah.
Why
You can do
not?
online, that's 1 hour a week. That's just in service.
Absolutely.
And then if the
100%.
universe wants it to be big, it will explode.
Of course.
Fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at it. It's gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think it's a great idea. I think it's a magnificent idea, and I'm in.
Let's call it SOULCIETE Recovery.
I love it. I love it. Done.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll set up a time, and we'll set up a Facebook. Yeah, set up a Facebook group and do.
Yep.
Whatever the universe leads us to do. That's exactly what we'll do. But at the end of the day, I guarantee you, we'll at least help one person in that group that night, or that day, or that meeting.
That'd be amazing. It'd be such an honor. And that's really what this is all about, is serving, because I know. Yeah. Okay. This is perfect timing because I got to run off to a dinner party anyway. So it's perfect. And then that would make me, look, I just think of it like on our deathbed, I always think about that movie, Schindler's List, and at the end of that movie, when he's like, I could have helped more people. I could have done more, and that's the only regret I could ever have on my deathbed. I want to live fully. I want to give fully and do as much as I can and be able to say I did my all. That's
Absolutely. All. I don't want to be laying there thinking I should have done that. When Erin mentioned that, I should have done it because look at the impact it could have had. And here I am about to die, and now I can't do anything about it. So now we're going to do something about it.
Awesome. Done.
So on that note, thank you so much. And I will be in touch with what I think some core principles should be. And I can only fathom that you will be doing the same.
For sure. Absolutely.
Well,
okay.
Have fun tonight.
Thank you. So I will, for sure.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.